And welcome back to the Editors Roundtable, sponsored by the Patriot Sentinel. I'm Rashard Tortorella, your host. I have my good friends Ben Fenwick and Pat McGigging. How you guys doing tonight?
We're good. Pat McGuigan's good too.
Pat
Ben
McGiggin.
Fenwick is
Yes.
just fine.
It's been
Let's
one of
kick
those
it
weeks,
off.
So 200,000 signatures, that is a number that can change Oklahoma's political parties forever. From the Capitol beat and the former editor of the transcript, and myself, I'm your host. Gentlemen, welcome back. We dodged the bullet last week. Norman is fighting over a shelter, and we have to start with the boxes of paper that just landed at the Capitol. Yesterday, Oklahoma's United turned in over 200 signatures for State Question 836. They only needed about 173,000. Is this going to be a done deal? Pat?
Well, it might be. It's interesting. One thing that happened early on is the Supreme Court decided that you couldn't challenge this being heading towards the ballot in the first place through petitioning, and it was only 3 decades ago, I guess, that they actually had ruled the opposite way, that you could challenge at the front end. It might be not be 3 decades, might be two, but in any case, as you would expect, Jonathan Small of the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs, a man I agree with about 90% of the time, issued a statement saying that the petition drive is led by a group from New York City, a multi-million-dollar campaign utilizing out-of-state signature gatherers. I'm not necessarily against that, but that's getting the information out there. And they are attempting to put a question on the ballot to impose California's chaotic primary election system here in Oklahoma. Well, in response to that, Jonathan pointed out in his statement, a grassroots movement on the other side, on the conservative side, has emerged. It impacted the legislature, where the vast majority of the Republican caucus issued a statement encouraging people not to sign the petition. But there's been a lot of interesting things going on. Mayor Holt helped to gather signatures in the closing days of the petitioning drive. And what Jonathan believes is that what proponents claim about 836 would actually, that it would open more opportunities, would actually limit voter opportunities, because you'd only have the top two. And OCPA has been pointing out in their reporting that if you went back just a few years, you would have a general election between, for example, Drew Edmondson and Connie Johnson. Now, the voter registration numbers have shifted, but as conservatives have been pointing out, somehow this wasn't a problem
Right.
When Democrats had the control or sway over the vast majority of the government. It only became a problem when that became consistently right of center Republicans, but perhaps particularly Trump Republicans, who are provoking a lot of ire among the people that are in the minority in the state, but nonetheless have a voice. So I don't know exactly where this is headed. I do know that the photograph that we used when we printed Jonathan's statement on City News OKC has a picture of 8 people involved in this campaign, and there's some pretty hardcore left people. And don't get me wrong, there's some folks at the ACLU that are good friends of mine. I just don't think they represent on most issues the majority of Oklahomans. And I actually took advantage of the Democratic Party having an open primary for some years after I shifted away from the Republicans for a time and became an independent, which I remain. But I never thought that should be, or I don't think that should be, something that is imposed from the central government on any political party, whether it's the Republicans, the Libertarians, the Democrats, or any other party that in the future might be able to achieve ballot status. So I'm very concerned. And I'll be sharing the names of each of those individuals once I pin down which individual goes with which picture. But if you want to have fun, just go on City News OKC and you'll see the picture of 8 people and see how many of them are familiar to you. And the truth of the matter is, most of them won't be. And
Well,
that
let's
kind
just
of
say,
says something because they're the driving forces behind the campaign.
Pat, that they're all related to George Soros. Just blame everything on George Soros. So, I've been following this, and I've been going around the state of Oklahoma to most of the counties discussing the dangers of 836. And from a journalist point of view, the biggest concern that the Republican Party has about state question 836 is that it opens up and forces the Republican Party or a political party to allow other individuals, independents and Democrats, to participate in their primary. The reason the Republican Party enjoys the closed primary, if you look at today's governor's race, we have at least 6 Republicans running for the ultimate job in the state. If and they claim open primaries was a law of the land, all 6, in fact, all the governor candidates would be on the same June primary ballots. And as such, we are a Republican majority state. We would split the votes for the Republicans and most likely end up with Cindy Munson and another weaker Republican running in the general election. So the whole argument from the guys against 836 is that if you want to vote in the Republican Party, go change your registration, your affiliation, then you can vote. The Democrats have allowed independents to participate in their party for the last 10 years, but they failed to meet the deadline last year, and independents cannot vote in the 2026 and the 2027 Democrat primaries because they did not get their form in on time to the state elections board.
Yeah, and
Now,
that's
Ben,
really I'm still
well,
amazed by that. It just
well,
seems
look,
to me
look.
You're
like
amazed?
Well,
I was
Why
amazed.
would
Now
you
I
be
know
amazed that they
I
couldn't
think
get it in on time?
they,
yeah,
they did it
well,
before. Hey,
okay,
Ben.
I'll
Well, wait,
admit
Pat, hold on. Pat, we wrote the story. Pat, we wrote the story. I talked to the state elections board, Ben. The Democrat Party has never failed to submit the form to allow independents to vote in their primary. This is the first time in 10 years they failed to do that. Now, some people might say that was just a ploy to get these guys all riled up to sign the petition. But I know that you've been
I
tracking
don't
voter
think so.
sentiment. Well, look, it's what they're saying. But let's just go back to the issue that independents cannot participate in 2026 and 2027 elections. All right, they can't at the primaries rather. And so the problem with the guys who are promoting the 836, they think and they view and they're promoting the fact that independents cannot participate in the primaries, and they should because they're taxpayers. Now, you've been tracking voter sentiment. I've seen some of your stories. Um, what is the yes side actually pitching to regular folks? What are they saying to the independents about the
Are you
primaries
asking
and
me
why they should
this?
be allowed? Yes, Ben.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm going to go to Pat's thing where he said, he can't believe they didn't turn it in. And speaking, channeling Will Rogers here, I would say that I don't belong to an organized party. I'm a Democrat. And so it's not like they couldn't have gotten it in. I mean, it's like, you know, I'm
well,
not
let me put it this
surprised
way.
as disorganized as they are. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that having communicated with Democrats and having good relations with many Democrats in terms of my reporting side, um, they always got this done in plenty of time and they followed to the letter the instructions that they got. This time, they didn't. And this is at the same time that, admittedly, this is the party that nominates somebody and then can't figure out how to help them and communicate consistent messages to voters along the way, unless they're really an insider. And you've seen the turmoil in the Democratic Party state
Yes,
leadership of late. And those are people that I
that
know and have good relations with. But
that is the
what's going
point that
on?
that
So
is the point
anyway,
that I would
I
make.
regardless whether it was a screw up or
Pat,
not,
let Ben
I
finish his
think it
thoughts.
should be up to political parties to decide how they choose their nominees.
And I would agree with you,
I,
but
I I
Ben,
agree. All right.
do you
I
agree?
don't know enough about their messaging or how they tried to sell this. I will say it speaks to this kind of common sense sounding sort of approach that term limits had. And if you guys remember when we switched over to having term limits on all of our state legislators, well, it sounded like it was probably a great idea. Everybody was sick of things like, the stuff that was going on with Gene Stipe, the old machine Democrat from southeastern Oklahoma who had unrivaled corruption that was nationally famous, and and so instead they decided to have term limits, and the limits now are that you can't ever have a Gene Stipe again. But what it does mean is that lobbying organization lobbyists and outfits like ALEC now can move into that void and work their magic that way, and
Well,
they are the ones that end up having more power.
you give me
Or,
Alec,
or
I'll give you the National Council, elected officials. I'll give you various groups on the left, and I'll give you dark money, because the dark money in
sure,
Oklahoma, sure,
absolutely,
there's been conservative dark money, but the dark money
all
is
that
dominated by the big tribes, and
right. I
and
believe
the
it.
big tribes have their surrogates in the Democratic Party. On the other hand, Republicans have never done as good a job in Indian country, except there's here and there scattered around the state, some of the smaller tribes
I
that
wonder
the rural
why.
Republicans are closely allied with. But dark money is dark money, and so I worry
Well,
about there not being reporting
gentlemen,
and
gentlemen,
accountability. But on the other hand, I don't want to give up
that's
the
another
open,
story, Pat.
robust possibility of
No,
debate.
It is another
Pat.
story. What I'm trying to say is that this it sounds to the ear like it's a good idea to someone that thinks, why, let's just have everybody be able to vote for whoever they want. It sounds like that. On the other hand, what kinds of downstream effects is it going to have that people don't see coming?
Well,
And
yeah, and what
that's one thing I'm wondering about.
OCPA
Well,
had an excellent story by Ray Carter that
Pat,
absolutely
hold on.
quoted accurately.
Pat,
What?
hold on. You don't forget, we work with OCPA directly. So what the viewers don't understand, okay, you're talking inside baseball. The Pro 836 folks are saying that the reason they're pushing the open primaries is not because of dark money. In fact, a lot of money is coming out of state from New York, like you said, from the billionaires out of state to promote this. I always said in our reporting that Oklahoma is ground zero to see what they can do and learn here so they can promote open primaries in other Republican states. But my question to you, Pat, on the Pro 836 website, they're saying that having open primary will get rid of all the backfighting, back and forth, and bad politics. When I was talking to David Holt over the weekend or last weekend, and I asked why he's supporting this, and his answer to me was that it will allow the voters to have a better choice of candidates to choose from, that they will have to work for their votes. I disagree with that because, again, Republican Party in their closed primary system allows us to choose our candidates. Now, do you agree with Dave Holtz that
No, not at
the
all. I
party
don't
is
agree at
too
all. And in
backfighting?
fact, he's the product of a political system that holds its citywide elections in the middle of the winter, when turnout is going to be guaranteed to between 8 and 10% of the electorate. And I don't want to start bashing on David Holt. I do want to mention that one of the leaders of 836 is quoted directly saying that the majority of Republicans are the kinds of people that he hopes will go away as a result of this process. Again, those nominees should be chosen by either Republican voters or voters. If the Republicans decide one day to invite independents into their process, I'll be surprised. That'd be up to the leadership of the Republican Party and in its internal processes. It is not the job of the federal or state government to define the outcomes in party primaries, party runoffs. That's another thing. Will runoffs disappear under this? Of course they will. And it's interesting because they exempted the presidential elections because they knew what a storm, I would say a word before storm, but what a storm it would cause at the national level. So It doesn't affect presidential elections, and it doesn't affect municipal elections. Now, stop and think about that for just a few minutes, and you'll see why I'm concerned. This is manipulation writ large, albeit with clever messaging, clever wording, and a surprising number of conservative looking and sounding people backing it. I'm not one of them.
Ben, do you back this program? Do you back open primaries?
Long
I
pause.
have no opinion on it. What I do
Good.
say is I can see why a lot of people would be attracted to this. And the reason why is because we have seen a lot of extreme candidates come out of the primary system. You have absolute fire breathing, you know, southeastern Oklahoma types suddenly end up becoming, the front runner. And that's because they're chosen by the most extreme members of the party that will turn out to vote for them. And the less extreme, the sounder minds that might, prevail and be a little bit more governable or governingable, those people are shouted down. And so I can see why people would be attracted to the idea of, good Lord, let's make them shut up and let's go ahead and have open primaries, and we'll ferret out all the squirrels, and then we'll go ahead and go with some people that have a more moderate or at least centrist view. And centrist for Oklahoma is right to most other states, but that is the draw to that particular.
The only problem with your analysis, Ben, is that a lot of good Democrats that were very strong, high-ranking leaders in the legislature when I first started covering the legislature every day back in 1990 are people that now could not get past the Democratic primary process. And if you limit things in such a way that you empower those who can get the dark money behind the scenes rather than people that represent the majority view, you're going to get a very different kind of statewide elected official in Oklahoma. And, maybe that's what you want. It's not what I want. And by the way,
From
sometimes extremism, wouldn't you agree that sometimes extremism is in the eye of the beholder?
It might be,
Because
it might be, and I think, in fact,
I'm
it
a
is.
cultural conservative 100% down the line, all the way. I have been my whole life because of the way I was raised by my parents, but I'm a serious academic and I'm a serious journalist. And I'll never forget the way there was a war when I was elected to the National Press Club, and it took several rounds. It dominated an entire day of discussion when I was elected to the NPC back before I came home to Oklahoma to work. And the reason was who I am, what I believe, what I stand for, in addition to my the roots of my raising, if you will. I mean, we're headed towards a day where I can't even begin to describe what it will mean to have traditional Orthodox Roman Catholics marginalized. People like me, like they were marginalized by the Biden, nominally a Catholic, if I remember right, used to be pro-life. And I don't just, if I remember right, I know that that's correct. So in the Biden DOJ era, you had organized task forces investigating traditionalist Roman Catholics because of the substance of their belief. And you know what I mean by that. We both know what I mean by that. I mean pro-life. Nowadays, it also includes, for many Roman Catholics, being anti-death penalty. But after the pro-life, it looks pretty conservative down the line in terms of marriage, traditional sexual morality, and so forth. So I'm sorry.
Okay, Pat.
I've gone
No,
off.
that's great. We're gonna have to go to the next section. Hey, look, hey, if anything at all, the Secretary of State has to verify the counts. Then comes a 10-day protest period, and I'm pretty sure that's where the lawsuits are going to fly. And if it survives that, the governor issues a proclamation, likely placing it on the ballot in 27, if not 28. So let's pivot to Highway 9 here in Norman. Ben, You cover a lot of Norman. I hope you're covering city council meeting tonight and the homeless shelter proposal that's been dragging on for years, as long as I've been on the political scene. What do you think will happen tonight on city council?
You know, I am talking to you, not covering city council. And by the way, good timing because now I can't watch what's happening with city council. However, my wife is a candidate in the election for Ward 5 council, and she's going to update me as soon as I get off this call with you. What I do know at this point is that this has been kicked around a lot, but it seems like the powers that be, or the money types, the ones that want to develop Norman and all that kind of stuff, are totally dead set against this homeless shelter. The ones that are like, for the new arena and all that kind of stuff, they do not want to have a homeless shelter in Norman. The popular voters of Norman absolutely want the homeless shelter. They did a survey just recently. I think the city put the survey out. In any case, this survey, it had 347 respondents, which isn't all that good, but for the city of Norman, it's not bad. It was 84%, I believe. I hope I'm quoting this correctly, but it was north of 80%
Mm-hmm.
for the shelter. And when you look at the previous candidates, that now it's mixed up because a lot of them are for the new OU arena that's going to use taxpayer money. A lot of them are for the turnpike coming through. That's going to be coming through our ward, Ward 5, and a lot of them were totally against that homeless shelter. In fact, the previous mayor helped Senator Standridge try to get a law passed against getting a homeless shelter within 3,000 feet of a school or a church or any of that other kind of stuff, which is, by the way, 2,000 more feet than they require for a child molester. So what it boils down to is that they lost by 2/3. They lost by 2/3. And so I think the homeless shelter was a factor, if not the main factor. It certainly was one. And and so the city of Norman wants this shelter. And the people that are against it are there's one candidate who's running for Ward 5 who is against it. The FOP, I was in the room when the FOP was questioning my wife about it. And they were determining who to endorse. And they ended up endorsing her opponent.
Hmm.
And but the deal is this: the FOP is totally against it. They said, let me tell you, she made a statement to something effective. We have to take care of our unhoused friends and neighbors and help them get into a place where they can be better off, that kind of stuff. And one of those police officers spoke up and says, they are not our neighbors and they are not our friends. And she said, well, what do you propose we do? He said, we need to buy them tickets and ship them somewhere else. And that is how they feel. And that is hard edged. And they claim that 35% of their calls are homeless people. I don't know if that's true or not. I'd have to see that data for myself and, trust but verify. And so what do I think is going to happen? I think that I think we're going to go ahead and fund that homeless shelter in Norman. I think the next election is going to be interesting because there may be a bit of a margin get lost in it, depending on who wins. Um, I suspect those people will end up being, having a bunch of locals in their face again because the people of Norman want to help the homeless. And there's a thing about
Well, they
it
want a
too.
solution. The people of
They
Norman
want
want
a
a
solution.
solution. So being on council, I'm going over the packet now. So tonight's the second reading for the ordinance to schedule the $8 million bond election for April. Now we've had two bond elections in the last 2.5 years, Ben, and the last one passed overwhelmingly for the Votech schools. Do you think they can get the vote and pass another bond for $8 million, considering that we've passed 2 bonds. If you want to include the road maintenance bond, that's 3 in the last 4 years. Are people going to pass this knowing their taxes might increase to fund what most conservatives in Norman say is a low barrier shelter? Will they get the votes to cross the hurdles for a low barrier shelter this time around? Because they did it once, I
All
think, in
right.
2021.
Yeah, let's
Go ahead.
talk about this. Low barrier. You mean that they will take them in off the street even if they've been drinking? Like, for instance, the Salvation Army shelter used to have a rule. I don't know if I think they may have suspended it, but it's this rule that they won't take you in if you've been drinking. So if it's 14 degrees, go out there and die, right? And that is what happened to 2 people in 2018. And so this low barrier shelter, that's what they mean. They'll take you in if you've been drinking. They'll take you in if you have been addicted to drugs. They'll take you in, and to if you need a place for the night. And will this pass? I think it stands a very, very good chance of passing. Now we're talking about $8 million, and a lot of people who call themselves, I'm air quoting here, conservatives, want to cry about that 8 million bucks, and then they turn around and say what a great idea it would be to put the city in debt for 600 million bucks for that new arena. I think we have some proposals here, and one costs a lot less. And so, but a lot of those conservatives sure want that arena, and because they're going to make money on it somehow, they think.
Well, I said in a previous show where we were talking about the death penalty that sometimes those people wind up looking an awful lot like our people, depending on where you're sitting and what your circumstances are. We all have loved ones who've been down on their luck, and people that you care about, they become drug addicted. And part of the thing is, in the era we're in, this soundbite orientation and the constant vilification back and forth. I'm very proud to describe bluntly how I feel, but we need to get some love action going and some fulfillment of parts of the gospel that sometimes get left out. And that might include, like St. Paul said, he who does not work shall not eat. But programs to help people recover or learn for the first time an ethic of work, that's the kind of thing that needs to be going on. And in those shelters around the country elsewhere, they've, in some cases, again during the Biden years, they forbade faith-based organizations from requiring certain things about the participants in their program. And I just, how can you do that and expect to get a return, if you will, on the investment of time and energy? And on the other hand, in that same era, schools and individuals at institutions of higher education were being forced towards embracing or acquiescing to things they could never accept as believers. So I don't know how we get there, but it's time for some love combined with common sense.
Well, let me put my 2 cents worth there. So Ben, if you recall, I was one of the deciding votes in the temporary warming shelter in October 2023. And I made the decision, and I'm going to use air quotes like you do, as a conservative, because, look, I'm a conservative, I'm MAGA, but the responsibility of the citizens of Norman falls on city council and the government to protect. If the community, i.e. the churches and nonprofits, cannot do that, it's incumbent upon us to do that and make that decision for the best of Norman. Don't forget, we received $26 million in ARPA funds in 2022, which we covered a lot. You covered this. We covered a lot of programs with shortfalls. The Emergency Operations Center had a $9.5 million shortfall. We covered that with the money. We spent the money that we received wisely. And so when you're looking at $50,000 a month for a temporary warming shelter in October, and what happened last week? We had 6 degrees low, freezing temperatures here. What are we supposed to do What are we supposed to do? Are we going to allow these guys to freeze to death? Because both sides, I want to say both sides, politicize the homeless shelter, just like they politicize the Bearcat. But sticking on the homeless shelter, the people of Norman just want a solution to the problem. I would like to see a shelter where we funnel people into the shelter, determine what services they need, get them hooked up with DHS, get them hooked up with the VA. Let's get them on a path to being as close to 100% productive member of society. And as a Republican, you're a Democrat, Pat's an independent, we can all agree that government's responsibility, when nobody else can do it, we have to take that mantle up there. So all I'm saying that if council approves the bond vote tonight, expect a very loud campaign between now and April, and maybe now in February, because all the candidates will be lining up to say yes or no. But what they really should be discussing, Ben, because your wife is also a candidate, is what's in the best interest of Norman and the citizens. Are we going to let politics let people freeze to death? Or we're going to do something that needed to be done 4 years ago, and we had a perfect opportunity to fix the problem, but we couldn't get both sides to come to a solution. All right. So I am one of those conservatives that do think that we need a solution with all the money we spent on everything else, and we need to do what we can for the less among us. Anything else, Ben, on this?
I think you sound an awful lot like the mayor right now. I don't know if you intended that,
No,
but
no,
that's
no, 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 no. No. Look, Stephen is a good man. All right. I don't agree with him politically on most things here, but we had an opportunity with the last mayor to fix the problem. Okay, and we should have fixed it. Now it's out of control, and now it's become an issue where it has to go back for a vote. Because don't forget, in 2021, it did go up for a vote. It lost. But I think now, whether you're right, left, in the center, whatever, everybody wants a solution to the problem. Okay,
yeah.
that's what we are. City government, if anything at all, we have to try to work together to find solutions to the biggest problems in the city. Okay, and this is one of the biggest problems in the city. It is
Right.
not. Look, you're not saying if you're out on Tecumseh in front of McDonald's on a wheelchair in the middle of the night when it's snowing with a blanket wrapped around you. That guy needs to be, he was picked up by Norman PD and taken to a shelter. They did their
Yes.
job. Okay? But what if this continues to remain politicized and he dies? I've heard comments. People always send me, what are you going to do about this? What are your thoughts about this? Somebody should have picked him up weeks ago. Okay, I'm gonna say months ago, because I've seen him out there since October in the same place in front of McDonald's. He should have been picked up by the state and taken to the nearest hospital, and then evaluated and taken to the nearest shelter for further evaluation. We should not have to see a man in a wheelchair with blankets in the middle of the night. Not in this city, not when we have everything paid for. Okay, that's not who we are as Norman. Now, I'm going to get blowback from the right, and I don't care. Okay, our job is to protect the city and to protect the citizens. Now, once we figure out if you're a citizen and you want the help, that's what the shelter is for. Get you off the street, get you in the services that you need, and get you back to as close to 100% as we can. Now, I believe, I don't know if you guys believe it, but if you don't want services, if you don't want to get off the streets, I think we should buy you a bus ticket and send you to Minneapolis. Pat, do you agree?
Well,
If you don't want the
let me
service, if you
just
don't want
say,
the help, if you don't want the
let me
help,
just say, I think I agree, but listen, I was in a situation when I helped to write very passionate commentaries against the subsidy to the funder. And that was even though I have the deepest respect for Clay Bennett and many of the other members of the leadership team of the Thunder. I just don't think that taxpayers need to be subsidizing billionaires to that extent. I mean, So we've done so much for the Thunder. I love the Thunder. I love to watch them. What a group, especially the current group of players. But my closest allies, quote unquote, on that were just like sometimes has happened on the death penalty. They were people left of center. Um, and it didn't matter how many times you said, well, I'm a Thunder fan. I just, why tear down a perfectly good, state of the art, although it's a few years old, it's been upgraded constantly, Paycom Center, and replace it with something new? I still don't understand. But
Well,
people
Well,
people
having
that's a
want the
gone,
Thunder to
story.
stay here, and
That's
so
a
it
that's
won
a
overwhelmingly.
that's a story for another time. But Ben, I'll give you the final word. Let me before I give you the final words. That I'm doing what Ronald Reagan would have done and what Donald Trump would have done. Okay, if government can solve it, if the people can't solve it, they need leadership. Okay, we're here. The council is to provide leadership. Sometimes you have to make the hard decisions that piss people off. Okay, I've learned that. I've gone through it. You covered me. I've made the hard decisions because it was the right thing to do. And I'm no different than Donald Trump. He has to make the hard decisions for the American people. And sometimes a lot of Republicans get pissed off at him. I mean, they were pissed off at him in 2015 and 16 and through 2020. Okay, but the point is that we have to make the hard decisions. We don't get paid squat $100 a month, but this shelter is long overdue. And as a conservative, I think it's the right solution. Ben, you have the last word on this.
oh, well, let's just say this. Um, my choice is always going to be this. It's going to be with that guy in the wheelchair and not let him die. And that's it. And or those other people die. And that's fact. And I mean, certainly all the nonprofits and all the religious outfits that want to help the homeless or claim they want to help the homeless, they've had all this time to step up, and yet we had a couple of people dying in the streets. Well, let me just tell you, this is bad for business. They better believe it, and it's bad for a community like Norman that cares about its people. And so I like I said, I'm going to be with that guy on the wheelchair every time.
We were helping to
Absolutely.
push on Capitol Beat OK. We're helping to push information out to not just folks that might have a cell phone and be homeless, but to people that care about them on how to get them to the places where they can then be taken to or delivered themselves to get warmth, at a
Mm-hmm.
time of
Mm-hmm.
what could only be described as potential crisis. And I actually think Oklahoma did a pretty good job as a whole compared to some of the other states. And maybe it was just the luck of the draw of a few miles of where the storm passed through. But in any case, I stand by what I said earlier, all of what I said earlier, including the part of we got to get the love side of this right, and then
Hey,
we can get the
Everybody agrees with that.
responsibility side right.
you're right. And look, I love you, Pat, and I'm sorry you had to go through that with the National Press Club, but didn't I just smooth in easily with no controversy myself?
Well, I let's put it this way: I made a point
Did
of
you like?
going to the pictures of the two liberals that made sure it got approved ultimately in
Thank
that
you.
vote. I took photographs of them on the wall there at the press club because I'll
All
never
right.
forget them. I'll talk about them
Well,
another time.
the last story is last week's weather, the miracle miss, I say, but I don't think we missed it. So if you're watching, if you were here, look, they made a big deal, Snowmageddon. Actually, it turned out to be about 6 to 8 inches, just like they forecasted, but it wasn't a big deal. It was all dry snow. And Pat, was it apocalyptic like they said it was, or was just
Well, it was
a
pretty
snowstorm?
serious, but where we caught a break was we had very little freezing rain, and in some cases none, before a good long, I shouldn't say good, a long snowfall over many days, but it wasn't on a bed of solid ice a couple inches
Mm-hmm.
thick. And then the
Mm-hmm.
wires and the trees, by and large and on the whole, there's exceptions, but by and large on the whole, trees didn't come crashing down on people's homes. And guys with big trucks were able to help in some cases with taking care of some of these folks that needed to be got around. The metro system I helped to push. I'm not a huge fan of the downtown trolley, but it exists, and so does the rapid system and the bus system. And we were telling people, get to that, and they'll figure out how to connect you to get you to one of these shelters. And I just think that means we take each other serious, and we take the things we profess seriously, both. And people can help when they get in that situation. Sometimes there was actually a guy in DC that said, I asked him, it was a homeless food place. And we asked him the question when I was up there, how many people are gaming the system and how many people really need help? What's the proportion? He goes, well, in a lifetime I've been doing this, about 50%. It's about 50-50. Well, if it's only 50%, you still help the ones that are gaming the system, and then try to figure out ways to make them more responsible. And meanwhile, you help the folks that need help in the moment.
Right.
Because that's who we are. So
we're at the 45-minute mark here. We're going to have to wrap it up here. I'm Richard Tortorella, your host of the Editors Roundtable. I want to thank Ben Fenwick and Pat. I'm just call you Pat McGeegan for joining us tonight here. Pat, I look forward to your reporting, our reporting on 836 in the next couple of days. Ben, I'll let you go so you can go cover City Council, and I want to hear what their vote is tonight too as well. I'm going to tune in as well. For the viewers out there, thank you. We are building the channel here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. We're here every Tuesday night. I want to thank you, and thank you guys for coming on tonight. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.